Welcome to Words of Wisdom. On this podcast, we interview some of the most influential people in the world to uncover how they became the best so that we can help you understand how you can become the best. What's up, everybody? Grant Wise here. Welcome to Words of Wisdom. I am so pumped for my interview today. I'm connected to the one and only Mr. Brian Culhane, and is the first president of eXp Realty. Is one of the fastest growing real estate companies in the world. And I'm just beyond excited for this interview today. He and I have talked in multiple interviews, and I've always just wanted to come back for more because I certainly learned a lot in all of my conversations and interactions with him. And I'm excited for you to get that opportunity today. So Brian, man, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Grant, good to see you, brother. Always a pleasure, man. You asked some of the best, hardest hitting questions out there. So it's always a pleasure to have you go.
I love it. Well, I want to start with your story because I know you have an incredible story. Your path the last few years, going from injury to where you are today, and just the whole journey throughout that process. And so, if you don't mind, can you give us, what is your story? How did you go through some of the stuff you've recently gone through? Just kind of share that with our audience so they get a little perspective into your mindset.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the easiest story to tell because it's mine. And, I do believe everybody has a story to tell. And I know, we're talking a little bit about leadership and mindset today. So I definitely want to make sure I cover some of that. But it's funny because, I think if you take this back to, sort of outwitting the devil and Napoleon Hill and sort of the origins of success philosophy, if you will, they talk a lot about, what makes somebody successful, right? And so if you remember Outwitting the Devil, he went through this whole exercise where he started to interview all of these successful people, and he couldn't find a common denominator between the successful people. But then he started interviewing failures, and what he found was that the failures all had something in common, and that was an ironclad sob story. So it's funny now when I tell my story, I mean, a lot of it's sort of a sob story. And nobody wants to hear your sob story until you're a success story, right? Then the sob story is like, hooray, what an amazing story. But it's funny, until you reach that point, it's a sob story, and people run from that. They don't want to hear your problems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my old problems, but I'm going to weave it into. So I grew up in Chicago. I was a blue collar kid in a white collar neighborhood. I was surrounded by successful people. I was surrounded by business leaders and industry leaders. And, my friends' parents were the president of Pepsi or the CEO of Allstate Insurance, and I was carrying their golf bags, right? So I was just a little hustler, waiting tables and carrying golf bags, and actually I wasn't even waiting tables, I was bussing tables. Let's be honest here, right? And so I was just doing whatever it took. My parents were great parents, always there for me, spent a lot of time, gave me a lot of wisdom, love, and attention. But financial security did elude my parents. They were recovering hippies, from the 60s and 70s. So I was a 70s baby, right? And so as I got through those early years, I learned a few things. One was a work ethic. I played sports. My dad told me at an early age, Brian, if you want to go to college, you're going to have to earn a scholarship. I think I had like a 1.6 GPA and was more inclined to go fight under the bridge at lunch than sit in math class. But I buckled down, I hunkered down, I got it done. I ended up getting the scholarship and had a pretty solid college career, bounced around a little bit, but finished down in Louisville, Kentucky at Bellarmine University. Well, after about 27 winters in the Midwest, I wised up. I Grant wised up, and I threw all my clothes in a garbage bag, and I headed out west. I didn't exactly know where I was going. I had a vision of what I thought the West was. I'd been out to California. I'd been to Arizona a little bit when I was a kid, but I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I jumped in my buddy's car. I literally threw all my clothes in a garbage bag. Was collecting unemployment. I just gotten fired from some crummy sales job in the commercial real estate space. And I just said, you know what, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so I headed out west, coasted into town on fumes, was sleeping on my buddy's blow-up mattress, and I decided I'm going to go to real estate school. I used my last $400 from my last probably week 98 of my 99 weeks of unemployment insurance, right? And I signed up for real estate school. I also started, I know our last conversation, we really focused on health and wellness, but it was the beginning of sort of my health journey as well, because I started jumping in the pool, swimming. It was still March in Arizona, even though I felt like it was summer. It was a little chilly to go swimming. And so I was doing kind of the cold plunge. I was working out, hiking. And so that sort of started that journey. But also simultaneously, I started interviewing, looking for opportunities. Also training to be a waiter as my backup plan, right? So I was training at Eddie V's for as a waiter. And one of the ads I responded to was Glenn Sanford. Glenn was a early expansion team rainmaker at Keller. He was building websites around in various cities that he liked to travel to. And one of those cities was Phoenix. So he was a Canadian living in Bellingham, and go figure, he liked warm weather like I did. So that's kind of how we met, was off of Craigslist.
That's incredible. I mean, that's just insane to see how that, I didn't realize that that's how you guys had gotten connected, but that's really fascinating.
Well, and it's funny because this is kind of the inside story. So I was actually still trying to pass my real estate test, and he offered me the job. And if you think about, leadership and taking chances and betting on yourself, and some of these topics that I think we're going to discuss here, that was really a kind of an interesting moment, because I don't know how many. He offered me a team leader position for a top ranked website that was a lead machine monster. I mean, this thing was, he probably cranked out $1 billion worth of leads in those early years through some of his websites. So I said, sure, I'll take a team leader position, and I hadn't even passed my real estate test yet.
Well, talk to me about from there to here, because I know you had some health challenges along the way. Was it your hip that you
broke my hip? Yep.
Yeah, you ended up breaking your hip and went through some pretty serious health challenges, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, again, you think about, what makes us do anything? I do believe we all are sort of born with a drive to improve and get better and work out. What makes a baby want to crawl? What makes a crawling child want to walk? And, what makes a teenager want to head out to, overseas to backpack through Europe? It's this drive to improve. It's this questing mindset to just get out there. So I always had that. And, I think it's funny, when I went head over heels, it was off of a mountain bike. So I was actually trying to get better and work out, and, I ended up flipping over a curb and broke my hip in half. But I think, I've noticed, if I look back over my life, I always do my best work when my back's up against the wall. That's usually when we kind of, we don't have an option. I think of it in a lot of ways as it's you don't have a choice. If you think about Sun Tzu and the art of war, he would always position his troops with their back against a body of water, or their back against a cliff, or some way that he knew the only way out was to fight. And that was the only way they were going to live, was to fight their way out. And, I just think about now, even now that I don't have sort of as many pressures and just sort of, financial woes or things like that, we've definitely done well. And I still find myself manufacturing these little mini crises just to put myself back in that headspace.
I think that's one of the things you got to know from a leadership standpoint is yourself. I think it's the most important thing that you can know. And I think I can relate to you in a big way. I've always felt, I think the only way that I could say this is that just kind of like wartime general philosophy. I'm better in a bad time than I am in a good time, because I think a lot of people do get complacent and comfortable when things are going well, and you have to really be in a certain headspace to continually push when things are going really good. But when it's bad times and you don't know what's going to happen, and you got to make progress anyway, a lot of leaders will turn into different people. And
think about sports, right? They say in sports, you don't learn anything from winning. Right. Winning masks. They used to say winning can mask a lot of problems that your team had.
100%.
When do you figure out where the wheels are coming off, where the weak links in the chain are? That's when you're losing. So you learn more from losing and failing, Now, what you do with that will determine which direction your story goes in. But, it's sort of like fall 7 times, get up 8, right?
I'm curious to know, because it sounds like I'm getting a little bit of an insight into your mindset because, things are good now, but they haven't always been this way. Is this what it was at certain points in your life? If I'm remembering correctly, it was maybe 2 years ago, you were in Las Vegas, you gave a champagne toast about how you were at a convention for EXP years previous, and you even had to borrow money to get home. Sure. And then, became a millionaire, and, we're giving this champagne. I thought it was incredible. I loved it.
It's funny. Well, not only was I at the conference, I planned, organized, and ran the entire conference. It was all volunteer team. We had very little budget corporately. It was all sort of shoestring budget. This was back in, I think, 2015. So, we probably weren't even 1,000 agents at that time, right? So we put together the whole conference. I mean, I did everything from, wait tables and turn down the AC to book the talent to the guest speaker to everything, right? So we were running the whole thing. And by the end of it, people were like, "Oh, did you gamble all your money away?" I was like, "No, I didn't even have any money." Gamble. As a matter of fact, the money I had, I spent just getting through that 4 or 5 days. And at the last day, we all went out to dinner, and I had to borrow some money from 2 of my good friends, Dave Harbour and Tom Morrissey, other EXP originals, and $100 each. I didn't want to go to the well for 200 on one guy, so I spread it out. I took 100 on, and I did pay them back, by the way. But it's just funny. 3 years later, I was giving the champagne toast from the rooftop balcony at MGM, and my ships had come in.
I love it, man. I love those stories, and I think you were nail on the head when you started this. Like, nobody likes a sob story unless it's coming from somebody that has a success story. I want you to walk me through, who did you become? Let's just use that time frame. The 3 years previous to your champagne toast. How did you develop yourself into that version of Brian Culhane that was given that toast? Like, what did it take from a mindset standpoint? Was it just persistence? Was it, the wartime mindset? Like, what was it? How did you develop throughout that process so that you could be standing there to do that?
It's a great question. I had lunch with my high school basketball coach the other day. He was out here, Brian James, an amazing guy in his own right, an amazing career in coaching. I mean, he's coached at the NBA level as an assistant coach for Doug Collins at in the NBA. He was he's now an assistant coach for Northwestern University for Doug Collins' son, Chris Collins. He was a top flight high school coach. And I look back at some of the stuff that he imparted to us as players, and it really was that work ethic, that, bootstrap mentality. We were breaking 3 or 4 sweats a day. We'd have 3-4 hour game film review sessions. We'd get 10-page scouting reports on the other team. So he was such a master at preparation, analysis, and really pushing us to be better. So I truly believe, looking back, that he was using basketball to just make us better people. And, so that sports, that work ethic, I think is very valuable. And at some level, I think that's why Glenn hired me. He liked that because I think, what does sports really produce? It makes you, you have to be a leader, but you also have to know when to be a team player. So it's kind of that combination of knowing when to step up. Players make plays, and knowing when to be a role player and where you fit in to any organization, let alone a sports team. So it's just always having that ability to know where I fit in.
How does a person's identity translate to the moment that maybe they're in?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, obviously our personalities, at some level, I feel like I'm the same guy I was when I was 12 or 13 years old. I have the same mindset, but in the same respects, I've also evolved my consciousness through, reading books on philosophy, business, literature. But a lot of us know, Glenn would say it like this. He'd say, if we just implemented 25% of what we already know we should be doing, we'd be more successful beyond our wildest dreams. Well, so unpack that for a second. If you just implement, so the key phrase being implement, right? 25% of what we already know, we should be doing. See, I think a lot of people get caught up in this sort of like, I need to learn more. I need to read more. I need to watch more podcasts. I got to take more classes. I got to get more certifications. I got. And then I'll be ready to do the do. But like in I'm a Socratic philosophy guy. I'm currently reading Marcus Aurelius Meditations for the second or third time. And, Socrates would say, in order to question the do, you have to have done the doing. Right. So you got to do it first, then you can question it and analyze it. But until you've tried something, you have no business questioning it or analyzing. So I've definitely instituted that. And I've got kind of a new mindset about sort of my decision making. I call it intuitive decision making. So what's intuitive decision making? Well, listen, we all have genius ideas, right? I mean, you have a lot of great ideas. I see all the stuff you're doing, Grant. You're like me. You've got this boil the ocean mindset, right? You want to do it all, right? Podcasts, TV shows, coaching programs, leadership training. I mean, you're doing a million things. And so we all have these great ideas, but it's the people that act on those great ideas that we consider geniuses. I think it was Emerson who said, what we often recognize as genius are our own ideas unacted upon. So again, we'll see something, we'll go, oh, that's genius. And you're going, why is that genius? Because you had that same idea and you just didn't implement it. And so you're going, he's a genius. That guy's a genius. I had that idea. I thought that same thing, but boy, he's a genius. So what's the difference between the good idea person and the genius? They implement their good ideas. They act on it. So it's like we all have this conversation all day long in our brain. And it even applies to like, oh, I should pick up the phone and give Grant a call. Mm-hmm. Well, you have that thought. Now you either act on it or you don't. Now, a lot of us go, oh, I'll call him later. But then we never remember to call you, or I'll see your name. And I'm like, man, I need to catch up with that guy. I haven't talked to him in about 6 months. And it's always great catching up with him. And that's why I think you're such a success, because you actually act on those ideas. You implement, you reach out, you follow up, you put the note down, you write down you chicken scratch out the invention idea, you pencil out the podcast format or whatever, right? You just got to write it down. And then once it goes from a thought to an actual action, we just sat in Brandon Dawson's, who's Grant Cardone's partner, Cardone Ventures. He's the CEO of Cardone Ventures. We just sat in a 360 event with them, which is basically a business incubator mastermind program they have. And I mean, the number one reoccurring theme are words matter, right? Mm-hmm. He just keeps repeating words matter. And like when he's role playing, he's just picking apart your words, because those words, like he says, and this is this isn't Brandon's quote, but it's a quote that sort of resurfaces over time, throughout again and again. It's sort of this idea of, thoughts become, what you think is what you say. Okay. Mm-hmm. What you say is what you do, and what you do becomes your legacy. So that's how Brandon says it. What you think is what you say is what you do, and what you do becomes your legacy. Another way of thinking of it is thoughts become things. Tyrese said the other day that visions are physical. So it's all the same, right? Your abracadabra literally means your words are your magic wand. Speak your words into existence. Write them down.
That's what I heard you say in a recent interview we did together. You said your word is your wand, and whatever you say becomes the reality, however you swing that thing. And as an extension, when I heard that from you, I started developing identity, or not developing identity, but studying identity, and how our beliefs, our actions will never contradict our beliefs. And so when we're talking about execution being the game, a lot of people have these thoughts and these visions and these things that they want to go out, they want to do, and they want to create, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what I've kind of uncovered and discovered is that nobody will take an action if it's a contradiction to a belief that they hold, either about themselves or about somebody else or about this or that and the other thing. And it may have been why I asked the identity question, but what I've seen throughout my reality the last, I think it was 12 to 18 months, we talked in that recent interview, it was probably 18 months ago, and I started studying the power of your identity and went through other coaching on that topic. And I started noticing that if I had this thing that I wanted to do, I would have to sit back and think about, okay, now who do I have to become in order to make this thing a reality? Well, if I want to create a podcast, interview the most influential people in the world, who do I have to become in order to accomplish that goal? And I think that makes execution so much easier when you're not contradicting the beliefs you have about yourself or other people.
Can I give you it just gave me chills you saying that, but it just reminded me of, so I just wrote this down. My wife and I were just having coffee the other morning. Okay. And I'm not even going to preface it with what I think your reaction is going to be, but I'm just going to share it with you. So I wrote this goal down, right? Buy the Chicago Bears. Okay. What's your reaction to that, by the way? I'm curious.
I saw that the other day. I was like, hell yeah, he's going to do
okay.
that.
So like I was showing somebody else, and it kind of clicked in my head why I wrote that down, because in order for me to be able to accomplish this goal, think about all the things I have to become first in order to make this happen.
Yes.
So it's almost like the ultimate goal, because it's going to allow me to achieve all the other goals. And guess what? Maybe I don't ever buy the Bears, but think about all the stuff that I'll accomplish to try and get here.
Oh, without question.
Right. So it's like, set that high mark, that big vision for yourself. It doesn't have to be buy the Chicago Bears, but it could be run, hike the top of the Himalayas, or it could be, take my family to Hawaii on a private jet, right? Like something like that, because think about all the other things you're going to have to become, to your point, in order to put yourself in that position.
Without question, results are a byproduct of belief, and they're a byproduct of action. And I think that if people would start to look at the results that they want, really not so much as, we want to go out and we want to accomplish these things, but when you change the question, you ask yourself, like, who do I have to become? You so much fall in love with the process of getting to where it is that you're going to go. Because I used to be very achievement driven, I want to get this thing, I want to own this thing, I want to buy this thing. And when I switched when I flipped the switch and started thinking about, okay, well, who do I have to become in order to do these things? There's so much more to fall in love with about what it is that you're trying to achieve along like that journey. And it's just incredible, because the thing that it is that you're after becomes not so much insignificant, but it just becomes like okay, cool. Like I like that, I got that, but who I became is who I'm in love with. And that's just, it's so powerful
it's physical, it's emotional, it's your body, your mind, your spirit. I mean, it's all of it. And at some level it's literally comes down to your vibrations and what level you're vibrating at. And I'll give you a good example. So we went to the 10X Growth Con a couple weeks ago. We recently brought over Grant and Elena Cardone to EXP.
Big get. Congrats.
Thank you. And me and my team was very involved in that process, and our organization ended up getting them in our downline. And so, just unbelievable, life-changing experience just for that. And then we went down to the 10X to kind of keep going through it. And I'll even share I don't even think I've said this to anybody, but I kind of almost was like, I don't want to do another conference. And and it was like, still, we just had COVID probably 2 or 3 weeks before. So I was kind of like, oh shoot. And, but I'm glad I pushed through that BS. And I get like anxiety around crowds, and I get nervous when I have to go up in front of people. And I actually passed out giving a speech in sophomore communications class. And so I can play basketball in front of 10,000 people, but if I have to talk to a crowd of 5 or more, I get like super nervous, right? Sweaty pits, right? And one thing I noticed, and I picked this up actually a little bit at the terms of this concept at a Tony Robbins event. They had a guy, the guy who founded Beachbody. He opened the day and he'd be like, get up and go, yeah. And everyone's like, yeah. And he's like, no, do it again. Stand up and go, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And by the 3rd or 4th time, you're like, yeah, let's go. And you're jumping on your seat. And he literally used the phrase like, I'm conditioning your nervous system, right? You're conditioning your nervous system. And I was doing the whole biohacking thing, and I'm getting into the parasympathetic nervous system stuff. And it started to click for me, because you're literally, like, a lot of us talk about this, and you probably deal with this all the time in your coaching and your leadership, right? You've got a client of yours, or somebody comes in and you go, hey, I suggest, or you should try adding this, this, and this to your program, or your activities, or your workload, or whatever. And what do they inevitably say? Like when you tell them to add more things to their plate, what do they say?
Oh yeah, another thing.
I got too much going on.
Yeah, I don't have time.
Plate,
yeah.
Well, I mean, who doesn't, right? We all have a plate, but here's the fallacy, or here's the limiting belief that they have. They believe that the plate is finite. So in other words, let's use your nervous system as the plate, okay? So how does Tony Robbins jump around 15 hours a day, 5 days a week, travels the world, gives out 1 million turkeys for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, right? Like runs 200 companies, Grant Cardone, like, always on, always doing stuff, whether it's Easter, like the over-the-top Easter stuff with his family, or he's doing, the longest fireworks display from the biggest cruise ship with Fat Joe concert you've ever seen. I mean, how does this guy do this? All these on every clubhouse,
right.
Constantly. It's because he's conditioned his nervous system to handle more. And it just takes a little bit of ratcheting up every day, right? A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And pretty soon you don't even realize you're running 200 companies and you're on the go and you're jumping in and off private jets every 2 seconds. And you've got an amazing family and amazing experiences all over the place. And you're creating this limitless success and wealth for people. And that's kind of what I experienced at the 10X Growth Con. Was I was holding myself back. I was starting to kind of get complacent. I wasn't surrounding myself with people that were elevating at a higher level. I was sort of kind of the, sitting on top of my organization, kind of like the guy that's made it, feet up on the desk. And, I was kind of bullshitting myself a little bit, pardon my French, but I was kind of just, I wasn't growing at that point. This is crazy. So I've been struggling with some throat pain in the past. Okay. I talk a lot, Grant, right? So I've got the kind of deep tone. So I had some throat pain and I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go to a 3-day event, talk all the time and da-da-da-da. And then in the event, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I got to let that go. I got to stop thinking that all the time, because it's literally, and I've come home after 3-4 days of chest beating music and light shows and people on stage and Mr. Wonderful and Tyrese and A-Rod. And I've come home. I've worked 10 times harder than I did before, the couple weeks before, or the last year. No throat pain.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like I just said, I'm not going to. And it was actually Jesse Isler, who, if you guys don't know Jesse Isler,
yeah.
He's like the Forrest Gump of business and music. He's been in every major meeting from Run DMC to, Spanx, and he's talking about how he had an ultra marathon coach telling him, he could only get to like 50 miles, and it was a 100-mile ultra marathon. And he's like, his body started breaking down. And the guy just kept telling him to yell, I don't quit. I don't feel pain. And he's just like, but I'm broken, man. I can't even move my legs. He's like, I don't quit. I don't feel pain. Say it. And the guy's like, I don't quit. I don't feel pain. I don't quit. I don't feel pain. And he just kept running. The guy kept yelling at him to yell it. He kept yelling it. 75 miles, 80 miles, 95 miles. Eventually he did the 100 miles. And his body and mind had completely shut down at 50. And what was the secret? Well, he just said it out loud over and over and over. He said, I don't feel pain. I don't quit. And so I swear to you, Grant, I started saying that all weekend. I was like, I'd be tired. We maybe had a few too many glasses of wine the night before, and it was up again at 6 a.m. And I'm like, I'm not hungover. I don't feel pain. I don't quit. Honey, give me some aspirin. But it's like, I mean, I just started implementing that, and it's actually working.
Oh, that's just so incredible. So what you're saying is that it's almost like finding an affirmation that you can tell yourself in that moment where you're just like, I don't quit. I don't feel pain. I don't quit. I don't feel pain. And it's not that you aren't actually feeling pain, maybe in some instances, but there's just something that happens in the mind where you're able to just keep pushing and keep going, even though.
Well, and Marcus Aurelius says pain is a choice, right? Like you decide to give that quality to that experience. Like you're the one who decides that pain is painful. So it starts in the mind, right? So it's like, I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, but there's like hardcore science that backs this up. I kind of use in the health and wellness space, I talk about how your body is a healing machine. Okay. So just chew on this for a second, right? So your body knows nothing else but heal. It's set to heal, right? It's set for growth and heal. That's it. That's all it knows how to do. So that's the machine's purpose, your body, right? And it just needs two things to run optimally. It needs a good program and it needs good raw materials. So you got to feed it the right nutrients, minerals, liquids, et cetera, right? And you got to have the right program running or the machine's not going to do what it's supposed to do, right? It's not going to be optimized. And so in other words, the thoughts and the diet will allow you to heal pretty much anything. Your body will be able to heal anything it needs to heal. You're the machine that heals yourself. Doctors don't do it. Medicine doesn't do it. So how do you turn your machine back to heal? Well, you got to start running the right programs, telling yourself, saying the right thing. So yeah, that mantra of I don't feel pain, I don't quit, is just the program. I'm literally scoring into my brain tissue, right? I'm etching, because every thought we have is like I think we said this in the last conversation, but I use the metaphor of like walking over clean, beautiful, pristine snow in muddy boots, right? So every thought is like walking over that. And if you keep having that same thought, now, by the way, thoughts are bad. Thoughts are impactful. Saying it's 10 times worse, right? So if you're saying negative things, or if you're thinking negative things, that's bad. If you're saying them out loud all the time and you keep repeating like, I'm no good, I could never do what Grant and Brian do. Those guys are, they're just confident. They put it out there. And you just keep saying it and saying it. Pretty soon you're literally, it's physiological. You're scoring a, Wim Hof calls them downtrodden neurological pathways. You're literally just like etching this canyon in your brain, and you can't ever get out of it, or it's going to be really hard to get out of it.
It'd be so hard. What I was going to say a second ago is that when you said that your mind, your body will heal itself if you feed it the right things, the right thoughts, the right nutrition, those types of things, it will heal a sob story.
100%.
It will totally heal that sob story. Maybe because I've had one. Look, I'm not the guy that woke up and was really successful. I'm the guy that from a very young age went out and made a lot of money, made a lot of dumb decisions, lost it all, made a lot of money again, made a lot of over-investing, over-hedging decisions, lost it all, and made it again. Like, I'm the guy that's gone up and down and up and down, and I've just learned so much through that process. And that thankfully, I believe I've learned enough so maybe I can kind of minimize the downs a little bit.
Yes.
But that everything that you have just said is, something that is so healing to that sob story. Because when you're down in the trenches and life just feels blah, you got to understand what it was that got you there. I think a lot of people believe that it's these external situations or circumstances. My preacher, we were talking about COVID, he said, COVID, you've either been exposed to it or you've been exposed by it. And I think it's so powerful when you sit back and
write that down.
Yeah, well, and it's the same thing with greatness. And I kind of paraphrase the quote, say, greatness, you've either been exposed to it or you've been exposed by it. Because when you go out there and you set out to achieve these incredible things, greatness will expose you to what it is that you must become in order to achieve it. And everything that you just talked about, when you're talking about feeding the mind and feeding the body and the rituals and the routines that you can develop to pull yourself out of any situation, is something that greatness will expose you to. And it's so powerful when you're talking about what you consume and those types of things and how that really affects you. And I couldn't agree more that, it's bad enough to think bad, but it's also, say
it out loud, right?
Well, it's statistically, I was listening to Tom Bilyeu's podcast, Impact Theory. He was interviewing a mindset coach that worked a lot with collegiate athletes. And he says that if you think a bad thought, it's likely to happen. But if you say a bad thought, I think he said it was like 8 or 18 times more likely to happen because you said it.
Yeah, it cuts both ways, right? You can build things and create amazing life for yourself, or you can destroy and put yourself in a prison, and it's just what comes out of your mouth is the difference.
How do you get out of those phases? Like, what is it for you that does it? Because everybody has bad thoughts. I mean, no, it's not like we're all immune to this, but how do you move through those things? Is it just the power of positive thinking?
Cold water and breath work.
There we go. Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Like what
cold
do you
water,
do to get over?
People don't want to hear it, but cold water, because it sucks, right? Cold water freaking sucks. So let's go back to the the original thing we were talking about, which was ultimately there's a phrase I'm kind of gravitating towards right now. It's obstacles are not in your way, obstacles are the way.
Yes.
Okay. So it's sort of like, again, we were talking about manufacturing crisis events so that I'm putting my back up against the wall. Sometimes it's subconscious, sometimes it's intentional. So if you think about this idea of obstacle immunity, for example, right? Joe DeSena, who came up with Spartan racing and, wrote the book Spartan Up. He has this concept called obstacle immunity. Well, what is obstacle immunity? Obstacle immunity is a skill you can develop. And you develop it by intentionally putting obstacles in front of your path. So if you intentionally jump in cold water, and I used to do this as an athlete, I'll even take you back to one of my first mentors when I was a little athlete was Walter Payton, right? And everyone's like, oh, Walter Payton was your mentor? Well, yeah, for like 10 seconds. I ran into him. Me and my buddy Jeremy were throwing the ball around. Jeremy Moss, who's now a business partner of mine, he was my 8th grade running back, and I was the quarterback. And we were just tossing the ball around on a toboggan hill, Centennial Park in Chicago. And Walter Payton and Mike Singletary were there, and they had the trash bags on over their Hans and Franz sweatshirts, and they're up there running hills. And they kind of ran into us. We ran into them. Oh my God! This is like in the '80s in Chicago, right? So like nobody cooler than Walter Payton, right? And Michael Jordan wasn't even, just barely coming on the scene. And so he comes up to us and he goes, hey, kids, you want to be great? Run hills. And we were like, oh, cool. Wow. Walter Payton put his hand on my forehead. And what did I do after that? I ran hills. And it got me all the way through college. Earned me a scholarship. It paid for my education. And literally, it was my hack. It was the first biohack that I'd ever learned was make it harder in practice. Habituate yourself. So I started dribbling the basketball up the hill. I started doing lane slides up the hill. So what do you think when I got on the flat wood surface basketball court, do you think those muscle stabilizers that I learned from the basketball bouncing this way and that way and, me running backwards up the hill and making it 10 times harder than running flat, do you think I was better when I got in the game or worse? Right. Of course I'm going to be better because I made it harder in practice. So obstacle immunity is intentionally putting obstacles in your path so that when life throws them at you randomly, you're not only ready for it, you're excited about it and you look forward to it.
When we talked the last time, you were adamant about cold water and how to use that, and you got me started on taking cold showers. And
you look great, by the way. I see the reds. Or maybe you went golfing. I don't know.
No, I was on sun a little bit this weekend, but I started taking cold showers, and I hated it, like without question. Didn't want to do it, and started just forcing it, and found a rhythm for myself that worked really well. But no matter what, 5 out of 7 days throughout the week, I would get a cold shower for at minimum 60 seconds of just ice cold water. And it really helped me develop that mental muscle, that fight or flight response, and just develop, some of those tools in my mental tool belt. And it's allowed me to truly thrive in a lot of different experiences, whether it was good or bad. I attribute a ton of success to that cold shower. I know that people maybe listen to this like, I'm not getting in the cold shower. It's like, look, for me, it was the mindset that it helped me develop, because I'm committed to this. I'm going to do it. That's one huge mental thing. Getting through that cold water therapy, like that's a second huge mental thing. And just how that prepares you to go out there and live from a day-to-day standpoint. I mean, every morning, 4:30, I'm up, 5 o'clock, I do an hour of very intense workout. And then I hit that cold shower. Like before the day starts for most people, I've already done some very crappy things and mentally it's just in a different place.
Yeah, if the cold shower is the hardest part of your day, the rest of your day is a breeze. Yeah. I'm going to bring it all home, and I'm going to tie stoicism to Brandon Dawson, to cold showers to leadership. So the Stoics talk about Freedom. What is freedom? The only freedom we have is the freedom to use rational thought to respond to what happens to us. Okay, so life happens, things happen, people die, there's disasters, there's tragedies, and, you get put in jail, you get put in, whatever, you get whatever. And then you can either react emotionally or you can respond rationally. And if you react emotionally, you're giving your freedom away. You're giving your autonomy away, right? So if you think about the parasympathetic nervous system, Brandon Dawson was talking about in 360, he said, when things start going haywire, he gets calmer. When people start losing their heads, he relaxes and gathers his thoughts. And then what is that losing your head? That's your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight response. So if you practice every day getting in cold shower and staring down that your body, your mind, everything says, get out, you're too cold, pull up, the plane's about to go, dee, 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 dee. And you're like, I don't even hear the buzzers because my adrenaline's coursing through my veins and I've got tunnel vision and I can't even think straight. And, I'm arguing with my wife, I'm arguing with my kids, my business partners are threatening to sue me. If you practice adrenaline management on a daily basis, do you think you're going to rise to the occasion when S is hitting the fan? Or do you think you'll have a better chance of acting rationally if you practice throwing yourself into crisis situations? Or do you think you'll have a worse chance of practicing, of acting rationally during a crisis event if you practice it every day?
Without question, you're gonna be better. You're gonna be prepared.
Yeah. So it's all part of the same stuff, right? It's like I am training my mind and my body to respond rationally to what happens to me versus letting my emotions and my feelings and my fight or flight response dictate how I react.
I love it. I think it's so important if you're listening to this. Some people have a tendency to listen to this and say, well, I'm not Grant or Brian. I've done these crazy big things. I've done this or that. I think that it's so important to realize that life is a series of crisis moments. I mean, it really is.
Right. Small and big, right? Small
and big, without question. And so when you start to develop this muscle, even if you feel like you're the most average Joe on planet Earth, you don't have a lot of meaning. And I hope that is not anybody listening to this, but if you do feel that way, like I'm not good enough, you have this inadequacy, all these types of things, if you can start to develop this muscle, like Brian just described, even wherever you are at in life, I don't care if you're homeless and somehow you gained access to an audio and you listen to this recording, if you can start to develop this muscle on a daily basis to develop your brain for crisis management, life is a series of these types of events. And the better and more prepared you are to mentally deal with them, the more that you will thrive, no matter what, no matter where, no matter who. When COVID hit, I think it was obviously March of last year, we threw literally everything out the window from a content standpoint. The only thing that we talked about was mindset,
right,
and leadership and developing your mind to thrive in the moment that you're in, and giving people tips and tricks to be able to kind of start developing and doing those types of things.
Right.
And I think it's so important. I think, man, the work that you're doing is incredible. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you stopping by the show. This was, again, an incredible interview. The first time I met you in person, it was just totally random. I was putting on an event at, I think it was Gainey Ranch there in Arizona. And you just happened to walk in. I said, that's Brian Culhane. I'm going to go say, hey. And I said something to you and you said, hey man, I'm just a collector of success stories. And you do so good. The work that you do is so impactful. And I want you to know that we've only had obviously 2-3 conversations, but you put me on the shelf, man. You've definitely helped me in a massive way. Just the few conversations we've had, a lot of the stuff, and the content you're putting out and the words you're putting out, just like you are on this show, it's been deeply impactful for me. And I know it's going to be really impactful for other people. So I can't tell you.
No, I appreciate you, brother. And I feel the same way. And, from the moment I first saw one of your first, I think it was a Zoom call, or it was probably back when you were a blogger and I was reading some of your stuff, but I've always been a fan of you and your content. And, obviously anytime I can help you or refer you to anybody, you let me know. And, I think, and I just want to share this for your audience. One last little thought, mindset is not a finite situation. Think of mindset as more like brushing your teeth. Think of it as more as mental hygiene. You got to practice it every day, because the mind can go a million directions, a million times at the speed of light. And you could make one snap decision one way, and it could radically change the entire outcome of your life. And so, just think about that for 2 seconds. It's not like you reach a point and your mind is there. It's a constant effort. You have to constantly be working. And so I use the term mental hygiene. I think that's a best way to think of it, is you have to constantly be brushing your teeth. You have to constantly be brushing your mind and staying sharp. And that's why we do these things, right? That's why we jump in the water. That's why we surround ourselves with champion level, vibration level, super mindset ninjas like yourself, because, iron sharpens iron, and your vibration levels elevate my vibration levels. So I appreciate you doing that for me.
I love it, man. I appreciate you guys. We'll make sure that we list all the ways you can connect with Brian in the show notes. Make sure you screenshot, you listen to this episode, tag me on Instagram at LikeGrantWise. I want to know what your favorite part of this was. I know that might be hard because there was a lot of great stuff in here. So thanks again, Brian. And thank you all for continuing to listen. We'll see you on the next show. Thank you for listening to this episode of Words of Wisdom. This is a show designed to inspire you to become a better leader so that you can win in all areas of your life. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show. Please rate and review this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, go off and share your favorite words of wisdom from today's show.